Roger Stone pleading not guilty today to Bob Mueller's charges that Stone lied to investigators about his 2016 outreach to WikiLeaks and tampered with witnesses. Stone arguing the whole case is political and does not allege collusion. Then look at this headline in today's Washington Post. Roger Stone wanted WikiLeaks dump to distract from Access Hollywood tape. Mueller witness says that allegation does edge towards kind of an attempt at collusion. And the Post headline is based on the same witness Mueller relied on for Stone's indictment, person one, the conspiracy theorist Jerome Corsi, who we interviewed about the Stone allegations before Mueller used them in this indictment. And again last night, when I pressed Corsi on whether Stone was trying to reach WikiLeaks to time the release of the emails, he gave an answer that does sound bad for Stone. And our interview is, of course, now the basis for the Washington Post story I just showed you. Now, I'm joined by U.S. Senator and former prosecutor Richard Blumenthal. Senator, thanks for being here. Let's take a look together here exactly at Corsi's allegation against Stone. Do you have evidence or observation that suggests Roger Stone sought WikiLeaks help in timing the release of the emails around the Access Hollywood tape?
I can't prove that at all. I mean, I had one call from Roger, as I recall it. Roger disputes this on the day that WikiLeaks did begin in October, dropping the final emails on John Podesta, which Roger was essentially saying, we've got this timing issue because the Billy Bush tape is going to be released, and we'd like to have Assange begin releasing emails now.
Stone said that to you?
That's my recollection.
And did you tell the Mueller folks that?
Oh, yes. That was.
And were they interested in that?
Absolutely.
Senator, what everyone thinks of Jerome Corsi, Mueller's relying on his testimony, and here you have Corsi alleging Stone wanted to influence the timing of the leaks. Is that legally important?
Very, very important. In fact, that interview was really a blockbuster. Number one, it added support to the indictment of Stone, which shows, for the first time in a court document, coordination between the Trump campaign, WikiLeaks, and the Russian dump of documents that were hacked. Number two, it shows the motive for that timing, which was, in effect, to distract from Access Hollywood. And another point in that interview that was tremendously significant, not really mentioned just now, is that Corsi said he's told Mueller everything that's in the indictment and told you. And that's very significant because it's probably reflected in the indictment and what Mueller knows. So this is pieces coming together in that mosaic.
Yeah, and that's a Mueller witness basically dropping a dime on Roger Stone, which explains some of the drama between them. I want to get your response on something which was some pushback on Twitter to something that you posted about this. WikiLeaks, under their formal Twitter account, responding to this and saying, quote, what kind of senator provides an unquestioning platform for an InfoWars 9/11 conspiracy theorist with a history of lying and then conceals established facts demonstrating the opposite? They say the tape was moved to the day of WikiLeaks publication, not as part of some coordination. So that's also interesting. A lot's happening right now. That's WikiLeaks responding to you on Twitter. What do you say to that?
What I say to that is it's not about me. It really is about what the special counsel knows and can prove about WikiLeaks coordinating with the Trump campaign and using Roger Stone as an intermediary, a conduit, someone very close to Donald Trump personally, and then in the indictment, an outreach from someone directing a senior official to contact Roger Stone. So again, the pieces of this mosaic are coming together, and they involve also, let's remember, Donald Trump Jr. messaging with WikiLeaks at almost exactly this same time, October of 2016, saying, what's this I hear about a Wednesday document, Tom? There are more pieces coming together.
It is fascinating, as you say, with more coming out. Stay with me. I want to bring in a former colleague of yours, a Republican Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo. Congressman, you hear the senator here, and you've heard people in the Republican Party appearing to move the goalposts from no collusion and collusion is bad to no collusion by the president, or maybe collusion is okay. What's your view of where we're at and where the party needs to be?
Well, that's right, Ari. I think Rudy Giuliani a couple weeks ago was the first to kind of give the signal that now the last line of defense for the administration is to say that the president did not personally collude. And no surprise, a couple weeks later, we see this Roger Stone indictment, which is big news, but also isn't surprising. We know Roger Stone here in Florida. He's lived here for quite a while. He has been known to cross the line, and it appears he did it again. And with regards to his comments about this being some kind of legal lynching, it's not. This is due process. Mr. Stone has not been convicted. He has been indicted. He will have the opportunity to make his case in court or to cooperate with the special counsel. So we'll see what happens. I think it's too early to start drawing any conclusions. I think we cannot say for sure yet that Roger Stone was an agent or acting officially as an agent of the Trump campaign. But obviously, this is big news, and I think we'll be hearing more about it.
Do you think, from what you've learned, that it's possible that the prosecutor's theory is that Roger Stone is the linchpin, the go-between to coordinate that release on behalf of the Trump campaign in a way that benefited them?
It's certainly a major possibility, and it's been a reason why Roger Stone for a long time has been a major person of interest, both for the special counsel, but also during my time in Congress for the congressional investigative committees. So certainly, I think we're going to be reading and hearing more about this. And again, for us, the fact that Mr. Stone is in the middle of it all is not at all surprising.
Yeah. Senator, let me read also from something you're pushing now while we have you, because a lot of talk about how Mueller would finish up. You've got a new piece of legislation that would require a public report at the end of the probe or within 2 weeks if the counsel is fired, transferred, or resigns. The AP reporting on that effort. Let me put it to you this way. On the one hand, a lot of folks would say that sounds like a reasonable idea and a transparent one. On the other hand, does introducing legislation like that suggest that Bill Barr's attempt to kind of have it both ways was right? Are you conceding that maybe no public report is required under the current rules?
There may well be a requirement under the current rules under some circumstances, but it accords a lot of discretion. The rule that William Barr cited in his written responses just a day or so ago, a lot of discretion to the Attorney General. We're trying to make it clear and compulsory so that William Barr is not the judge. The statute requires a report to be done, and that report to be disclosed directly to Congress, and no basis for concealing or censoring that report. The public has a right to know. It's a very simple principle. The public paid a lot of money for this report. They deserve the results. And the idea that William Barr should be the judge or anyone else really goes against that principle that unites Senator Grassley and myself. It's bipartisan legislation for a bipartisan principle, and it's a special counsel who, after all, is appointed, remember, in only the most serious and significant circumstances of violation of public trust, and the public has a right to know.
Senator Blumenthal and former Congressman Curbelo, thank you both. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.